Good evening. My name is Sandra Craig, and I represent the Etiquette Foundation of Illinois. You are watching a live call-in television program brought to you on CAN TV 21. Let's talk etiquette. During the next 25 minutes, my very special co-host will be none other than Mr. Nathan Wright. I invite you to call in with your questions, comments, and concerns at our phone number, which is area code 312-738-1060. Again, 312-738-1060. Our phone lines are now open. Welcome, Mr. Wright.
It's a pleasure once again to be here with you. I enjoy each and every show we do together. I have a great time, and our listening audience, viewing audience have a great time as well. Thank you for inviting me to be here with you again.
I wouldn't do it without you.
Yes.
Okay, let's jump right in. Our discussion tonight, Mr. Wright, is about police and civility training. Mr. Wright, in your opinion, is civility being practiced when it comes to citizens by our police department? I know you told me there was an effort by EFOI to train the Chicago police officers in civility. Can you tell us a little bit about that initiative, please?
Yes, this goes back to the early 2000. We was interested in offering our services to the Chicago Police Department. There was an article by then Superintendent Terry Hilliard. He was very, very interested in how police treated the citizens of Chicago during that time. This was like the 2000-2001 time period. There were a lot of incidents in Chicago with police brutality, police misconduct, and the superintendent felt that his police department should have better manners. And so there was an article in the Chicago Tribune, in the editorial, that talked about the superintendent's concerns about how the citizens were being treated by the Chicago Police Department, his police department. So from that article, that editorial, we decided to approach the Chicago Police Department and see would they be interested in having us come in and do a training on civility for the Chicago Police. We were well received at that time. They were interested in fact, doing that. And so we prepared a compendium and a curriculum for the Chicago Police Department. It took I would say maybe 6 months to develop the material for it. And then, unfortunately, we were supposed to start in October of 2001, but unfortunately, 9/11 happened, and so the program was never done because of 9/11. And what you see here on the screen is the Chicago Tribune's article. You can look it up online, I suppose. A more civil police force, please, is the heading there. And so it's an important subject, and certainly it's unfortunate that 9/11 happened and we never had the opportunity to do this program, but it's still very, very needed. And perhaps we'll approach the Chicago Police Department again about this program.
Yes. And Mr. Wright, you also mentioned it wasn't just civility training, but it was also sensitivity training.
Yes.
Would you like to explain that to our viewers, please?
Well, as you well know, Sandra, from your own experience, from my own experience, people who are in uniform, unfortunately, may have a macho kind of attitude. They may be more abrasive in how they talk to you. And it's a very sensitive thing to have someone who has a weapon and who represents the law talk to you in such a way that you may feel disrespected. So sensitivity is part of how a policeman should be trained, to be aware that the average citizen is more sensitive to this individual than they are to anyone else. So that policeman certainly should have sensitivity training. So then, his voice, the way he speaks, his diction, his body language, all of those things play into how you're going to more than likely react to this individual. Naturally, in our community, there's a high level of fear of the police. And whether we're in Chicago or anywhere else, if you're stopped, there's a degree of fear. Your blood pressure go up, your stress level go up. And then if you encounter a policeman who's talking very demanding to you in a way that you feel like he's not respecting you as a citizen, then tension can occur. Then words can go back and forth. And then the situation is out of control. And it's so easy for something like that to get out of control. And I know you were going to talk about the individual that just very recently was choked to death.
Well, what I wanted to say is comment on what you were talking about, the way the police talks to a person that they're stopping or under arrest, because, your words can guide a conversation or a situation in a certain way. If you're talking to someone in a demanding, controlling voice, that could provoke fear. It could provoke anger.
Yes.
And now we've got a situation that's out of hand. And of course, that's the worst thing a person can do.
Yes.
Is respond to the police in a negative manner, because it could result in his or your death.
It could very well lead to that.
So it's important.
In a matter of moments.
So I guess the sensitivity training is very important, because if I understand it correctly, the sensitivity training helps train the police officer how to have a conversation, how to be calm,
Yes.
how to approach. And I know that because of all the violence in our city, it's probably difficult for the police to remember and practice that we're talking to an individual who is considered innocent until they're found guilty. And maybe I should talk to them in a proper manner. Because,
Yes.
so many times it's not what's said, it's how it's said.
How it's said. That is so, so true. And a policeman is an authority. He is an authority, and oftentimes they take that authority to another level as to demean you, to look down upon you, to treat you as though you may not be a citizen, really requiring a certain degree of treatment as a citizen. And it's so unfortunate that we have a lot of policemen who, perhaps they are under stress themselves. They've had a difficult day themselves. And here they are now confronting you, and they aren't going to tolerate any talking back or any gestures that you may, behave in such a way that they may think that you are threatening to them.
Right. And I imagine if you're doing this every day, from 9 to 5 or whatever the hours may be, and after a while it becomes routine, and you figure you have to be tough or rough before this individual gets rough or tough with you. But that's not necessarily the case in all situations, because some situations could be brought under control just by a conversation.
And the way the conversation
you approach the person
goes. Yes.
Yes.
So true. Absolutely. And I actually think this should be taught to our citizens as well, especially our young men in the community, even our young women, because the police have these encounters with our young women who, for whatever reason, feel like this individual policeman is disrespecting her, and she lose control and say some things that she should not have said or reacted in such a way that she should not have reacted. And then now it's become a violent confrontation between you and the policeman. So civility training helps the policeman have good manners, know how to talk to a citizen in a respectful manner. After all, they are supposed to be working for us. They receive tax dollars for the job they do. So their attitude and behavior is really critical to how the citizen is going to respond to them. And I think it should be taught in the schools in terms of how to interact with the policemen.
And I agree. Let's hear what our caller has to say. Caller, you're on the air. Caller, are you there?
Hello.
Hello?
Hi. Good evening. I believe the Illinois State Police did take the train as well as a citizen, because there's some police officers that have unprofessional character about them, as well as the citizens of Illinois. When you give respect, you're going to get receive respect, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the youth today, they verbally, talk back, to their parents, even to, a professional police officer, and no officer under that circumstance should receive that treatment as well, and as well as, the citizens out here either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good call. Good
Mr.
call.
Wright, would you like to comment on that?
I agree with the caller. You're absolutely right. This is why I said we need to train our young men and young women in the public schools. They need this kind of training more, perhaps even than the policemen. Because if you are subject to be volatile, you're subject to lose your temper, to act in an irrational manner. This is only going to provoke the policeman to act the same. And then when you have two people acting that way, the policeman generally has the upper hand. He has the law on his side or her side. And so I think from both sides, this kind of training is important. And we advocate this, as you well know, Sandra, for public school students to get this kind of training.
Yes.
We normally refer to it as etiquette, but it's the same thing. Civility is basically the same thing. But we think the policemen should definitely have the training simply because they are armed individuals who have a lot of authority and power in their possession, and we feel it's important that they have more control and self-discipline than perhaps the citizen.
Yes, and I do agree. Mr. Wright, I'd like to ask you, has there been any new efforts on the part of EFOI to get civility and sensitivity training for the Chicago police officers?
No, we have not made that effort. I'm seriously thinking that we should attempt again to see if they're receptive to this kind of training. I think the reluctance that we've had in the past is based on oftentimes policemen just do not like to be told that they need to learn how to behave as a policeman. As a citizen, first of all, but also as a policeman. And they tend to want to resist any kind of thought that may say that they are not professional. And so, but we may very well approach them again about this to see if they would consider it. Yes.
Right, and I agree that I think that EFOI should. But Mr. Wright, it's difficult for anybody, well, I won't say anybody, but it's difficult for some people to hear that their behavior could use a step up or some training.
Right.
Nobody wants to hear that they're not behaving in a proper manner.
Right. Absolutely.
I want to share something with you. I did some research, Mr. Wright, on cases where police were accused of violating a citizen's rights. And it goes back to December of 1951. There was 50 Los Angeles Police Department officers that participated in a beating of 7 Latino men at a police station. In 1986, Michael Zilzon became involved in a scuffle while at the scene of an arrest. He wasn't the person to be under arrest, but he was there, and he actually was blinded in one eye. In March 1991, Rodney King was arrested and beat by Los Angeles Police Department. And videotaped by a bystander, they caught the scene, the incident on tape, and 4 law enforcement officers were charged locally with assault and other charges of which they were acquitted. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in 1992, the Los Angeles riots took place, and Mr. King accepted a $3.8 million settlement. The officers that were involved were later charged in a federal court for violating King's civil rights. 2 of the 4 officers were convicted. The other 2 were let go. But I would like to bring us up to date to a couple of weeks ago of an incident that happened in New York City where a gentleman named Eric Garner was being arrested and accosted by the police for selling illegal cigarettes. And Mr. Garner was, of course, thrown to the ground and put in a chokehold and heard twice saying that he could not breathe. And the police continued to administer force. Unfortunately, Mr. Garner had a heart attack and died an hour later at the hospital. And of course, selling illegal cigarettes is a low-level crime. My question is, do you think the type of force that was administered for this crime was too much that they did to Mr.
Well, obviously it was too much because the man is dead now. So was it justified or justifiable? I guess if you saw the video, you would probably think that it certainly wasn't justifiable. Now, how does this relate to civility training, sensitivity training? I think it does. I think that, your oath of office, when you become a policeman, I think one of the first things you should have an allegiance to is how to control yourself and how to be self-disciplined so that you do not overreact in a situation like that particular situation. Certainly did not call for the kind of reaction that came from the police. So civility and sensitivity training, and I think even race may be included in this sensitivity training, because perception, if a policeman sees a citizen, approach a citizen, and then it's based on that citizen's race, then that could be a factor that's motivating that policeman to behave in a certain way, to treat that individual in a certain manner. And it could just be a situation that gets out of control much easier if it's race related.
Yes, yes, I agree. Maybe our caller has a comment. Let's hear from our caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Good evening. If you notice, in some places, I have seen officers don't weigh no more than 120 pounds, and they happen to be a woman, and they know how to deal with the situation. They may know how to use what they call verbal judo. But when you look on the south side and the west side of Chicago, it seems like the number one requirement sometimes to be a police officer to be a big, beefy guy. And a lot of times, I think the only way you could deal, I saw that videotape where you was talking about. First of all, they used the illegal chokehold on that person, and they wasn't supposed to do that. That was illegal to use that type of hold in the first place. And they broke their oath of office in terms of obeying the law. So they broke the law themselves. And second of all, I think only one way you could deal with these type of police officers, that especially in the high crime area, I think they should do the same thing they do to the schools. When they have a high crime area and police is not doing their job, make them have to reapply for their job like they do the school teachers, and watch and see how fast and everything would change to be better.
Well, then that's a good response.
You know what? I hadn't thought
Very
of
good.
that. I caller, I think that's a good idea.
Absolutely. Now, you can see why sensitivity and civility training is important. It should be at least once a year, 6-8 week training every year of a policeman's career. He or she need to be reminded that they have an obligation to the citizen, and that has to be done in a certain manner. In their voice, in their verbiage, in their body language, all of those things are very, very important, because they're out there day in and day out dealing with citizens in so-called high crime areas or not. But they need to be even more sensitive to the citizen who is living in those conditions as they would with somebody who's on Michigan Avenue.
Yes.
Yes.
I believe we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. Oh, I thought I heard it. Well, anyway, what I wanted to say, Mr. Wright, was this. That was a very good comment because they do make the teachers go back and receive new training. They have to further their education, and they're dealing with our students, our youth. I think the same rules should apply to the police because they're dealing with our youth, they're dealing with the public, and I think it would be excellent if sensitivity and civility training was not only taught for the police, but also for our young men and our young women, like you said, in school, because we know etiquette is a life lesson.
Absolutely.
And depending on the situation you find yourself in, the sensitivity and the civility training could very well save your life.
Absolutely, from both persons, the
Yes.
citizen as well as the policeman. I think the policeman is a bigger obligation to give that policeman regular training, once a year, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 weeks of training in this subject, because they are out there day in and day out doing the same kind of work, and they may have confrontations with 8 or 10 citizens a day. And you go through that day in and day out, you get to be in a certain mind frame about how you're going to treat the next one. Are you tired? You're fatigued?
Oh, yes.
All of these things play into your attitude. And so this is why I think it's so important for our policemen to be at the highest level of professionalism. And the way you have your encounters and engage with the citizen is part of your professional requirements. And it's critical. It's a life and death kind of issue.
Yes, yes. Okay, I believe we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air.
That's me.
Hello?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm on there.
Yes, sir, you're on the air.
Yeah, I want to call about that police, how they doing people.
Okay, and what's your comment, sir?
What?
What's your comment?
Well, I want to tell them that the police department, they is something else. When you go into I stumbled into a police bar, and all they talk about is shooting people. All they talk about. And I didn't know I was in that police bar.
Oh.
Yes. Well, we
And that's all they talk about. Is I wish he had to move, I would have shot him. And I
Oh.
would have did that, and I would have did this.
Oh,
They,
wow.
they talk about everything but helping people. They talk about shooting people all the time. That's in a police bar where all police be at.
Well, you know that there was an incident, about 2 years
Would you
ago,
talk a
3
little
years
louder
ago.
because I'm hard of hearing.
Okay, thank you, caller. There was an incident about 2 or 3 years ago where a policeman was in a bar drinking, and he beat up the barmaid. You remember that
Yes,
incident?
yes, I do.
And I saw the video on that. It was just, outrageous the way he conducted himself. So maybe policemen shouldn't drink at all. Alcohol consumption can be a real serious issue if you have a gun, especially.
Yes, yes. I think we have one more caller.
Hi. I heard what he said. Yeah, police, when I used to be arrested, almost every other word is a swear word practically. Do so much. But when it comes to social etiquette, there's one thing unknown that is uneducated, is toxic, and being toxic drugs and its side effects, besides toxic mold, which also causes that, and the ozone, when it touches Earth, also is toxic.
Yes,
So
yes.
I studied the side effects of these things, and there's stupidity, sickness, and reversal of healing. Not to say that crystal meth is those maybe 30 more, and changes your DNA and genes.
Yes. Caller, I am so sorry. We're out of time, but please tune in next week to our show.
Okay.
We're going to do part 2. So please call a friend and tell them to tune in, okay? For next
Thank
week.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Wright, for being my co-host. Thank you to all of our callers. Please tune in next week. Have a great week and good night.